You've been talking about this before, I know, and writing about this as well. DeepSeek, that Sputnik moment for China not so long ago, right? And the AI explosion in China that it is leading to. It's underway as we speak. Do you think this is going to end up being sort of the savior of the nation? And I ask this simply because, you know, whether it's state money or private money backing all these startups, et cetera, it could potentially create a lot of jobs for these kids that you talk about, right? Who are overqualified, you know, with a physics degree or whatever, can't find the right job, so they prefer not to dig ditches, so they stay at home and play computer games. What do you think? I mean, how much of a savior potentially could AI in China be?
Well, there's both a plus side and a minus side for the Chinese authorities that they look at what the DeepSeek moment, as you put it, Martin, might mean next. On the plus side, this is a sign that something that has been very big in American policy over the last 7 or 8 years may no longer be working. And that's the idea that if China is cut off from some of the most cutting-edge American technology, the really cutting-edge chips, what former National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in the US called the small yard but high fence. In other words, that the US was only going to limit a certain number of technologies, but they would be very heavily restricted. Well, now it seems that China is much better than the rest of the world might have realized at finding workarounds. In other words, with that kind of large language model, artificial intelligence, AI type of model, yes, it's true that China hasn't had access to some of the most advanced forms of technology from the US, but it has found ways to actually create something that works just as well in many ways, but is much, much cheaper. So that's why it's that sort of Sputnik moment, the idea that China doesn't necessarily need to draw all of its technology from the US. It can innovate at home. Big companies like Shanghai Semiconductor may not have the cutting edge capacity of the best chips from Taiwan, which go to the United States, but they still have lots of capability. That's the plus side. The minus side, though, is that we may see the same phenomenon in China as we're beginning to see in the Western world and elsewhere in Asia. And that is that, yes, AI and the technology that underpins it can create extraordinarily efficient new aspects of the economy. It can do jobs that humans could do at much greater length at very high speed. But it doesn't necessarily create new jobs. You've heard the tale. You talked about people eating our lunch previously, Martin. And in this particular case, I think you have to say that many people would think that AI is going to destroy an awful lot of jobs through automation and the ability to mechanize processes in the Western world, maybe in the United States. The bad news is that could be true for China as well. And Chinese long-term haulage engineers, truckers, people working in what you might call low-skill industries, they may also find themselves outpaced by DeepSeek and by the developments in AI. So the Chinese Communist Party, the leadership in Beijing, is going to have to find ways that AI can create new jobs and not just simply make the existing jobs more efficient. There are possibilities. They include areas, for instance, such as new forms of retail. You may find that more people are working from home. It may increase the participation of women in the workforce, where there are some disparities, but it's not a slam dunk. There'll have to be real policy changes made to actually make sure that new AI and new technology in China actually creates new jobs.
So at the end of the day, it boils down to the job security and how much of a commitment there is on the part of Beijing to build and further foster a consumption-oriented economy. Because I want to get some color in terms of how the Gen Zs, who you say are critical in deciding the future of China, how they're feeling and viewing how China is positioned in all this.
Sherry, that's absolutely right. And again, if you monitor social media, if you look at the way in which China's younger people, those middle classes, one of the most online communities anywhere in the world are expressing themselves, a lot of them seem to feel very, very nervous about what's coming next for them. So over the last 4 or 5 years, there have been different trends that have emerged. 4 or 5 years ago, it was this idea of what was known as lying flat, tangping. In other words, the idea that China's younger people didn't think there were jobs out there for them in their 20s 20s, in their 20-somethings, and their 30-somethings. They were thinking that simply going out and looking for jobs that demanded that you worked 9 in the morning till 9 at night, 6 days a week. That was a kind of rat race they didn't really want to be part of, and where the jobs didn't really make it worth working at that level of as they would see it, exploitation. Today, the memes are slightly different. Amongst the things that people are saying are talking about rotting away. This is a rather kind of negative term people use about joining the current employment market. But things could change. One of the things that the Chinese government is going to have to do, and talks about the way in which it actually really wants to stimulate the economy, is to have more domestic consumption. But to do this, China has to possibly do one thing, maybe two things, that it will find politically very uncomfortable. One of those is to reduce slowly its global trade surplus. And the thing is, right now, China pushes the button for manufacturing and exports when it doesn't know what else to do. It's kind of the sugar high from the point of view of China's economy. Make more stuff, make furniture, make toys, make components, and ship them overseas and bring in cash. And, that sounds like a great model. The problem is that is combined with China keeping its capital account closed. China does not want to have a freely convertible international currency, because that means the control of China's renminbi is out of the hands of the Chinese Communist Party and into the hands of the international markets. But if they want to have that control of the currency, have that kind of international export capacity, then growing domestic consumption becomes much harder. And yet to get that 20-something generation confident, buying again, raising families, having more kids. Chinese are having far fewer kids than before. That's going to be a very difficult combination for the party in charge to actually manage. But that's what they need to do to get China's youth spending and confident again.